This week on the show, we have Greg Boden, the author of the action-packed fantasy thriller, Stormbringer, The Predator's Stone. Hello and welcome. Thank you so much for watching. This show is all about giving you insights and showcasing brands that help you to live your best life and give you confidence. As always, I want to kickstart your morning with some motivational advice to help you to feel inspired and energized to start your day. Today, I want to talk about the importance of understanding that an ungrateful heart will never attract blessings. We live in a society where we are taught to go after more things, more money, more success, more everything. Due to this, it's easy to get caught up in this lack mentality and feel like what we have is never enough, or that we need that one extra material thing in order for us to be happy. But the reality is, until we become grateful for the things that we do have, we cannot attract more blessings into our life. In fact, when we are ungrateful, we often block blessings from coming into our lives because of our constant focus on lack. The moment that we begin to realize that we have more than enough and that everything else on top of that is just a bonus is the moment we open the floodgates of abundance by filling our hearts with gratitude. Make your mission today to focus on how much you already have and begin to count your blessings. As Oprah Winfrey quotes, "Be thankful for what you have, you'll end up having more. If you concentrate on what you don't have, you will never ever have enough." Stay tuned. Coming up after the break. And fast forward, let's talk about your book, Stormbringer, The Predator's Stone. Tell us about the synopsis of the book and some of the characters.
Sure. So I love mythology, and Norse mythology has always been my favorite. One day I came across a picture of Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil is the world tree, and it has the branches hold up 9 realms. And right away, I was just fascinated with this. And I read the inscription or the description at the bottom, and it said that at the bottom of this massive tree that spans the universe, there's a snake that sits at the roots of the tree, and it chews away at the roots. And the prophecy was that over thousands of years, this snake would eventually chew through all the roots, and the tree would fall over, and it would be the end of the world. And I was fascinated by this, but I thought, what if someone came along that had the ability to cut down this tree much faster, like days or weeks? And what if there was someone from our world, where we live on Earth, who has been prophesied hundreds and hundreds of years ago to stop this person from cutting down the world tree?
Wardrobe provided by Le Chateau. Next up on the show, we have American author Greg Boden. Greg is the author of the action-packed fantasy thriller book, Stormbringer, The Predator's Stone. Greg, thank you so much for being on the show today. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. It's good to be here.
It's good to finally have you and talk about your amazing book, Stormbringer, The Predator's Stone. And before we get into it, let's talk about your passion and when it began. I know that it started in college. You were doing a college contest. Tell us about that and how your passion got ignited.
Right. So I was taking a creative writing course in college, and it was one of those things where I needed the elective credits. It wasn't because I was particularly interested in writing. Right away, the instructor had us write a short fictional story so that he could measure our abilities right from the beginning, or lack of, right? And so he had us write this fictional story. I wrote the story, and it was called Lady in the Market. And I turned it in, and a few days later, I get it back, and at the top of the paper, there was no grade. There was no score. All it said was, "Come see me after class." Mm-hmm. And in fact, it was written in red ink.
Oh.
Yeah. And I think no matter which country you come from, red ink on the top of your paper is not a good sign. So I was nervous, but I was ready to defend my work. So I met with him, and he said, "Have you ever had formal training in writing?"
Okay.
And I said, "No." And he said, "Okay, because you might want to consider writing as a career."
Oh, wow.
He said that might be, you have a knack for it, and so it might be something that you could do. And he said, would you be interested if I entered your story in a contest that they were having? It was called the Young Writers of the Central Valley, which is where we live in California. And of course, I'm not going to pass up on something like that. So I said, yeah, knock yourself out. So he turned in my story, he submitted it, and I ended up taking first place in the fiction category. And it was later published in a trade magazine called the San Joaquin Review. And so that of course, for me, that was like, okay, that's it. You got to start getting into writing. And I started focusing a lot on my writing, because in fact, I'd like to think that if it wasn't for that opportunity from that teacher, I don't even know if I'd be sitting here talking to you right now.
Amazing. That's the great thing about great teachers, right? They help us to find out what our passion is. So I love that for you. That's amazing. Right. And you describe yourself as a dreamer and a believer in all things make believe. Tell us about your creativity. What kind of inspires that to make these dream worlds and alternate universes in your books?
Right. So I've always been drawn to monsters and magic. If I had to put a label on it, I would say fantasy.
Yeah.
And I don't know about Canada, but in America, those people are affectionately referred to as nerds. So that's always been me. I played Dungeons and Dragons when I was a kid, watched every movie that I could that had wizards and barbarians and all these types of things. But I was never into reading as a kid for fun. It wasn't until I got into high school that everything changed. I was in my freshman year, and I started to go to our library, and I would sit in the library because it was warm and it was a good place to wait for my friend.
Yeah.
And the librarian came up to me one day and she said, I noticed that you don't ever read when you're in the library. And I said, well, it's cold outside, and this is a great place to sit. It's comfortable. And she said, you're not going to leave the library today until you take a book with you. And I'm looking around thinking, does she say this to everyone? Is this a thing? And she said, what are you interested in? And so, being a 14-year-old boy, I was my communication was extremely limited, but I mumbled something about monsters and magic, and she disappears, and she comes back with The Hobbit by J.R. Tolkien. And, this is way back before the movies came out, so I didn't really know anything about it. And she says, take this home, read the first chapter, and if you don't like it, you can come back and I'll never bother you again, and you can use my library. And so I take it home, and I read 3 chapters, and I am completely hooked.
Yeah.
In fact, The Hobbit has become my all-time favorite book. And so from that moment on, I started reading every genre I could, but I mainly stuck with fantasy. And it just felt great to be able to escape from the pressures of the world and read about someone else's pressures. Especially if it had to do with dragons and things like that. And so just real quickly, in order to come up with the things that I do, a lot of times I'll put myself into the scene before the scene is ever created. Mm-hmm. And so, for example, there's a scene in the beginning of the book where Cinder gets on a Viking longship and she crosses the Atlantic Ocean with her friends and to get to Iceland. And I thought to myself, I put myself in this scene. If I was on this boat with my friends, what would be the craziest thing that could happen? And of course, there has to be a sea serpent that attacks the ship. And so that's how I create the scene. But so I start with something big, and then I start mentally going through all the details. What does the weather look like? Is it overcast? Is it sunny? If you look over the ship and you look into the water, would you see bubbles coming up, letting you know that there's something down there? And so the ideas start flowing in, and I grab the best one.
And fast forward, let's talk about your book, Stormbringer, The Predator's Stone. Tell us about the synopsis of the book and some of the characters.
Sure. So I love mythology, and Norse mythology has always been my favorite. One day I came across a picture of Yggdrasil. Yggdrasil is the world tree, and it has the branches hold up 9 realms. And right away I was just fascinated with this. And I read the inscription or the description at the bottom, and it said that at the bottom of this massive tree that spans the universe, there's a snake that sits at the roots of the tree, and it chews away at the roots. And the prophecy was that over thousands of years, this snake would eventually chew through all the roots, and the tree would fall over, and it would be the end of the world. And I was fascinated by this, but I thought, what if someone came along that had the ability to cut down this tree much faster, like days or weeks? And what if there was someone from our world, where we live on Earth, who has been prophesied hundreds and hundreds of years ago to stop this person from cutting down the world tree? And so that's basically the story. Odin is the supreme god of all gods. You have to have Odin if you're going to have a story about Norse mythology. And he knows about this prophecy. He knows about Cinder, but he's very arrogant. He's very self-centered. He can't imagine that this 12-year-old girl from America could make a difference in his world. And so he's against it from the very beginning. In fact, he names her the Stormbringer because in Old Norse literature, Stormbringer is a title given to someone who brings nothing but bad luck. And right away, when she arrives there in Iceland, she brings terrible luck to their plans. And so he names her Stormbringer, which is where the book comes from. So he sends out a group of young girls that are her age, and they're specifically trained to run missions for him. And it made me think of Jedi from the Jedi from Star Wars, highly trained, laser focused, and these predators go and pull her right out of her school cafeteria in Richmond, Virginia, and they put her on this boat and take her off to Iceland. And she meets, of course, other characters there. And so the basic idea of the story is to get back to California, which is where the world tree's roots are located under the earth, and stop the tree from being cut down.
Very interesting and exciting. The main character, Cinder, had, quite an unfortunate life, being abandoned at birth. How do you think those hardships has made her victorious in this book and her determination?
Right. So I work full-time as a school counselor.
Oh, okay.
And I had a student several years ago on my caseload, and she was homeless. She lived in an old car that didn't run anymore. She lived in an old car with her mother. Really sad situation. However, she was super smart. She had really bad attendance, but she could show up one day of the week or 2 days, and she could take a test, and her scores were off the chart. And I got to know her because she was always getting into trouble. And I got to know her, and the more I got to know her, the more I realized that she really wanted to be a good person. Mm-hmm. She wanted to do what was right, but she was always trying to do the right thing in the wrong way. And she was in several fights, and in fact, I think she was in 4 fights in one semester. Anyways, I wanted to base my character off of her. And so Cinder is based off of this person that I knew, this one of my students. Oh. And Cinder is, she's a foster child. She's never known her parents, no money in her life. And she is like this student that I have. Her impulsivity is always getting her in trouble, but down deep, she wants to do the right thing. And I think that it's this her ability to never give up and to want to prove to the world that she's a better person than what the world sees, that it helps her overcome all of the obstacles that she faces. And I think that's the message I wanted to send out, that no matter who you are, no matter what background you come from, no matter what weaknesses you have, there's good in you. And if you stick with it, you can do great things.
I love that. And of course we have protagonists in the book, but we also have some villains. So tell us about some of the villains that you created in this book.
Right. So one of the things, this is a 5-book planned series.
Okay.
And I wanted to do something different. And so when you say villain or antagonist, I set it up so that the reader thinks it's one person. And then in book 2, you think it's a different person. And so throughout the books, it's hard to tell who the villain is. There's always bad guys throughout these books. But Odin, right from the beginning, appears to be one of the antagonists because he's just so arrogant and all he cares about is himself. And then you've got Valkyries, which are shield maidens chosen by Odin. And their job is to, when a war is over, they go down and they take the spirits from the men and women, the warriors that have fought valiantly, and they take them up to Valhalla, which is the Norse version of heaven or the afterlife. And you never know if this Valkyrie in the story is good or bad. In fact, Tristan, and I can mention him later, but Tristan also appears to be a little sketchy, and he might have something up his sleeve. Ulterior motives is all I'll say for right now.
And if you could turn this into a movie, who would you get to play these characters, including Cinder?
I would probably, if of course, if I had my way, I would get someone like Chris Hemsworth to play Odin. I know he was Thor in the movies. But it would be great. I love his acting style, and I think he would be great as someone like Odin. For Cinder, I'm not well versed on some of the younger actresses and actors that are out there. I don't know if you've heard of Eric Tremblay. She's actually from Canada.
Okay.
Yeah, she was in The Bye Bye Man. She was in Extinction. She was in Before I Fall. And if the listeners or viewers ever have a chance to look her up, Erica Tremblay, she just has the look of Cinder, the red hair and the pale skin, and very Nordic looking, like as if she's from Icelandia. She's a great actor too. So, but she's almost 16 years old now. So if we're gonna do this, we gotta get it going.
Well, you know what? I do a lot of red carpets, so if I meet her, I'm definitely going to tell her about this, okay? I'm going to connect you two. We're going to manifest this for you.
Right, please do. Please do.
And on Amazon, you have so many amazing reviews of people loving your book. How does it feel to see that you have such a great response to this book that you've created? Yeah, it's been surreal because when I first wrote the book is actually 12 years old. Oh, wow.
I wrote the book, and I had this fear that no one would like it. I had this fear that the publishers wouldn't want it. And my wife finally threatened me and said, if you don't send this out, you are sleeping on the couch.
That's a good wife. It's a good wife to push you.
Yeah, it was great. A good threat. So I sent it out to a few places, and I got a response back. And then the reviews started coming in, and they were positive. And and not everything is going to be positive. I know that there's going to be people that don't care for the book, and that's fine. And I think that's the message. That's the advice I would give to people that are looking to write or to do anything. Actually, is you'll never know if you could have done it. I don't want to get to the end of my life and be sitting on my front porch and sit there and wonder what would have happened if I had done something with my books. I want to be able to say that I tried something, and even if it doesn't work and it isn't successful, at least I tried.
I think that's fantastic advice. Sometimes it's their own selves that hold us back, right? It's not anyone else, it's our own
Exactly.
fears. And as soon as we let that go, we're able to really flourish and,
Right.
bring our gifts to the world. So I love what you said. I created my platform to inspire, to uplift. I know you talked about it a little bit, but, for anyone that really has that fear, they're creative, maybe they have a great idea, or maybe they're just feeling low. They're not going through a good period in their life. And, they're fearful. What would you say to inspire them? Because I feel like, you're someone who really walks the walk and really put his ideas out there for the world to see.
Right. Um, I would say to get the idea onto paper. If you just keep it up in your head, it's never going to get realized. And then start sharing it with the people that you're close to. This could go for a book, it could go for a new business. It could even be a relationship that you were wanting to start. Talk to people, see what they think about it. But in the end, I would highly suggest to not listen to the naysayers, because there's going to be people out there. In fact, I remember when I first came up with this idea, I had some friends that said, "Oh no, this idea has been done before," or it's only aimed at a niche group of people, and I had to ignore that, and I had to just to go for it. I'm sure you had to do the same thing with your show.
Yeah.
There might have been people that said this isn't a good idea. I would say give it a shot and see what happens. And in the end, if it doesn't work, try something else, because you're going to get rejection slips. I got rejection slips. Stephen King got rejection slips. I have a picture of Stephen King and J.K. Rowling close by, because I look at them sometimes when I feel discouraged and I say, hey, they got turned down. I think Stephen King got turned down 35 times before they took his first book. 35 people turned down Stephen King. That's amazing to me. And so just ignore them and go for it.
I think that's a great idea. I interview successful people for a living, everyone from Sylvester Stallone. There's so many people, James Franco, just to name a few. And, they all said the same thing, is that they all went through so much rejection before they ever encountered any success. So It's just part of the process, right? You have to put yourself out there, and rejection is part of the process. But if you're passionate, you're going to do it anyways, right? So.
Right. Exactly.
Yeah. And Greg, for all of our viewers that want to read Stormbringer, where can they do so and purchase your book?
So you can, the easiest way would be to go to Amazon. You can log in to the internet, and you can basically go to any of your favorite bookstores, and you can get it sent to you, a physical copy. Most people go through Amazon. And you can also get the digital copy if you prefer to read it that way. And I do want to give one shameless plug. Book 2 is called Throne Runner.
Nice.
And that comes out in the fall of this year.
Very nice. We're going to link that information for your book so our viewers can purchase it. Greg, thank you so much for being on the show today. Congratulations on an amazing book. And we're so excited to see the next book that comes out.
Thank you. Thank you. This has been great.
The Darriel Roy Show is available on Roku, Amazon Fire TV, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts.